What is going on, IB Nation? It is Wednesday. There is 10 days, count them, baby, 10 days until Notre Dame finally kicks off the 2023 season. And Brian said he wanted to do a prediction show, and I said, you need to figure out how I can be on it too, because this is one of my favorite shows of the year. We always have a blast doing it together. And so here we are. We're going to do our prediction show. We're going to have a lot of fun. For those of you that are on the message board, I believe it just dropped, right, Brian?
Yeah, that's actually the reason we're a little bit late getting started is because I was finishing up my practice report from today because it was a really good session. I got home, I cut up the podcast from earlier. I then had a meeting with Blue Wire, which I'm really excited about something they've got going on at Blue Wire that we'll talk about next week. Then I had to write the practice report and set the show, and now we've got this show. So I have been busy. But it was worth it because I thought the receivers had a really good day today. It was actually cool, Vince. We got to see like a bunch of RVA, routes versus air. Sorry.
Really?
So we got to see like some route combinations with the quarterbacks and receivers. We got to see some one-on-ones, some red zone one-on-ones between the receivers and DBs. And so what I did today, because I didn't have Vince to chart for me normally, so I was actually talking to myself, like what I was seeing, explain what I was seeing. And so I was listening to it. So I was playing that. And Vince was like waiting on me to get the show. And I said, yeah, I published it. I said, the receivers had a really good day. And he goes, it sounds like it, because he's listening to me talk about like, man, what a great route. Merriweather beat Morrison off the line, used a great stutter move, beat him inside for a touchdown. It was just some really cool stuff like that. By the way, that actually happened. So you want to go read the practice report. It's on the message board. So right now that's I'll put it out on the regular site later, but right now that is a message board only thing. But yeah, Vince, man, really good practice today. Our last practice of all camp, man. So it was really nice to end it with all the complaining about the receivers. It was nice to end it with the receivers playing really well. I mean, Tobias had a really good catch. Dion had a great catch against Clarence Thomas for a touchdown. Jaden Thomas ran a great route. Ball was off. Jordan Faison absolutely obliterated Ramon Henderson for a touchdown. Would have been a touchdown, but the ball was off target. Really good session from the receivers today.
Awesome.
So I was happy to see that. Yeah, man. So we got to see who the kick returners were today. So that was really good to see. That's in there too. And then Zeke Carell was out there today, Vince. He didn't practice today, but he was in pads and he had his ankle taped up. So that was a really good sign.
Good.
Good. Man. So there's a lot of stuff going on today, guys. But this is our favorite show. And Vince, you and I were talking about it because, I mean, this is just something we've always done together. And I was like, love Ryan, love Sean Stiers. Those are my guys. But, when you're doing a prediction show, you got to do it with the OG. You
got to throw it back.
This is how we had to make it happen. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today, Vince. A lot of different fun stuff. It's going to be a good show. It's not going to be your typical hour and 20 hour long night show, right? This is going to be more of a traditional IB big show type of thing. This is just so we'll do a mailbag afterwards, all that kind of stuff. It's IB after dark. Yeah, although it's not quite dark. By the time the show is over, it'll be dark.
Yeah, that's fair point. It's fair point. I do have a bedtime, but it doesn't matter. It's IB Nation. So here we go. So, all right. So we're just gonna go through. We got all kinds of different topics that we're gonna hit, bold predictions, MVPs, all of that kind of stuff. We're just gonna go right down the list. We're gonna have some fun. I haven't seen Brian's list. I just shared my list with him, and so we don't really know what each other's gonna say. And I'm interested to see how closer.
That's
100%.
Normally how we'll do it, and I definitely didn't look at his bold predictions because I want that to be more fun.
Yeah,
those are a lot more fun. So, and we always have some fun with those.
Absolutely. So let's kick this thing off, Brian. Our overall kind of expectations of 2023. I mean, that's what are we expecting from this team? Then we'll get deeper into it, individually, but like overall, like what's our ceiling, what's our floor for the season moving forward?
That's really the thing for me, Vince. And when I look at this football team and you look at the record and you look at being in year 2 of the Marcus Freeman tenure, year 2 of the Al Golden tenure on defense. I know they have a new offensive coordinator, but as I've reminded people, the last time Notre Dame played for made it to the college football playoff, they had a first-time coordinator on offense. The first time they played in the college football playoff, they had a first-time defensive coordinator as their defensive coordinator that season. So, look, if you got the chops, you got the chops, right? And we're going to find out 100%. Whether or not Jared Parker has the chops. But at the end of the day, also, they have the talent. And sometimes talent is got to be enough to get you there. You can't keep blaming everything on something, right? You've got to make it happen. And so we're going to find out what this team is capable of. But, when I talk about the ceiling, I mean, the ceiling for Notre Dame should always be national championship in theory.
Correct.
But I think this is a team that has the capability if they can catch a couple breaks. I do think Notre Dame's talent is still such that they do need to catch some breaks. A break could mean something like, hey, a tipped ball in the championship game results in an interception, or, in the semifinal game, something like that. Like, you need to catch some breaks. Good health at the most important positions is a break you want to catch when you're a team like Notre Dame. They're not a team, Vince, that can just go out there and out talent people week after week after week in the postseason, right? I think they can do it for most weeks in the regular season, but not even every single week, but close enough to where, hey, you may beat us in a couple areas, we can beat you in a couple areas. Now let's go get the job done. Right. And then you get to the postseason, they're going to have to outcoach and outplay some people, and I think that's a big part of it. But this is to me the best chance that Notre Dame has had to be that kind of team since I've been covering the team, when you look at where Notre Dame is, but also when you look at what the other teams are, because that's part of it too. If there was an if I knew that there was an LSU 2019 team out there, I'd say, look, man, I hope you can get to the playoff and not have to play that team in the first round. Because Notre Dame's just not there yet.
Right, for sure.
Right, if we're being honest. But are they close enough to where if they can catch some breaks, they can go out there and be that team? I think they are. That's the ceiling. And so it's not just you're Notre Dame, championship's always the goal. That's true, but you're not always a championship football team.
Agreed. And
the reality of it. I think this team can be.
Well, and I think that you make a good point in that, okay, not only are we looking at Notre Dame, but we're also looking at the landscape of college football, right? I mean, if you look at all of the upper echelon teams, the vast majority of them are all starting a new quarterback, for example.
And Vince, the other part is the quarterbacks a lot of those teams are starting are not the guys from the past, right? And we've talked about this, and this is no disrespect to Ian Book. If I didn't have the feeling I had about Ian Book, and I accepted that Ian Book was what most Notre Dame fans say Ian Book was, right? You have to admit that when you get to the playoff of 2018 and it's Ian Book, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence, and Tua Tagovailoa, one of these things isn't like the others.
Sure.
Right? 2 years later, Ian Book versus Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields. Again, one of these things is not like the others, right? Well, when you look at it this year, if it's the same teams, I'm sorry, I'm taking Sam Hartman over Cade Klubnik right now. Now, maybe in 2 years, Cade Klubnik might be a better player, but he's not going to be shouldn't be anyway this year. I'm not taking Carson Beck over Sam Hartman. I'm not taking Tyler Buckner or Ty Simpson or Jalen Milroe over Sam Hartman. I'm not taking Kyle McCord or Devin Brown over Sam Hartman, right? So it's just one of those unique years, Vince, where there's not the big-time quarterbacks that you have in other seasons. I mean,
absolutely.
It kind of reminds me of like the 2017 season. Well, you had Jalen Hurts, who was a sophomore that year. He ends up getting benched in the title game for freshman Tua Tagovailoa. Good players, but not their peaks, not what they would eventually become. You had Kelly Bryant at Clemson. You had Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma, who was legit. And then you had Jake Fromm as a true freshman at Georgia. You just didn't have those big names. Like in 2019, it's Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, and now senior Jalen Hurts, fifth-year senior Jalen Hurts, right? Like there just isn't that this year as much. Now, it could be if you've got USC's in the playoff and you look at a couple other teams, if they're in the playoff, maybe.
Sure.
But the reality is the team that has the best chance to have that kind of quarterback in the college football playoff, you get in the regular season at your place. You can handle your business already there. Right. And so it just kind of shakes out that way where if you catch some breaks. Now, I'm not predicting they're going to win the national championship right now. If I was going to do that, we'd be doing it later in the show. But I think those are reasons why I have a little bit more optimism maybe than some other people, because they don't have to get through that type of player with the kind of teams they had. That's the difference between Caleb Williams and what Clemson was in 2018. If Caleb Williams had Clemson's 2018 defense, just hand him the trophy now, right? Like, I mean, you might as well just give him the ring and do whatever you need to do, right? Like, it'd be hard to beat that, but that's not who they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's where
that's 100% why I'm confident that, like, I'm not used to sitting here as a Notre Dame analyst, as a Notre Dame fan, feeling like, gosh, I think I've got the best quarterback in the room. Like that doesn't
Right.
like I haven't felt that in a really
Right.
long time. And he's got weapons around him, obviously, that he can elevate and he can do all these different things. We're bullish on the offensive line. We're bullish on the running backs. I mean, this can be a very productive offense, right? And then you throw in the defense without Golden, year 2, returning a ton of talent, in that defense. All of those things are kind of lining up. And then you throw on top of the fire Sam Hartman. I mean, a 6th-year senior who is already in college football history books. You know what I mean? He's top 20 in yards and touchdowns. I mean, that's saying something. And so you and I have been screaming from the mountaintop. Notre Dame has been a quarterback away for so long.
Multiple teams have been that way.
Multiple times that's been the case, right? And I mean, 2018, for example, if you at the very, very simply, if you have Sam Hartman, 6th-year Sam Hartman, running that offense for Notre Dame, I think they win that game. They got a really good shot at it, right? So I feel very good about Notre Dame's prospects because they have Sam Hartman,
right,
and because of the talent that's around them.
But I will say this also. Sam Hartman is also not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Joe Burrow. He's not Justin Fields. He's not Kyler Murray. That's the other part of it, right? The thing is, though, is he doesn't need to be this year. He just needs to be the best he can be, right? He could maybe be Baker Mayfield, right? It's a little bit different deal where Baker was more of he executed that system at an incredibly high level, whereas like Kyler was just a freak, you know what I mean? Freak talent. Some of these other guys were also freak talents. And so that's where the other parts of the team have to continue to get better. And it's the supporting cast along with the better quarterback potentially that has us excited about this team. But this is also arguably the most difficult schedule Notre Dame has had since 2017 as well. Sure. That year you had to play Oklahoma, or you had to play Georgia that year, who ended up being the national runners-up. You had to play USC that season, which was an 11-win team. You had to play Miami, that was a 10-plus win team. Stanford was still good back then. Michigan State was a 10-win, top 15 football team back then. So, I mean, NC State was a 9-win, top 25 team. This season reminds me a lot of that. Might actually be a little bit more top-heavy, even than that season's team was, because we didn't know that Georgia was going to be that going into the season. They were coming off of an 8-5 year. It was year 2 of Kirby Smart. And again, you want to talk about comparisons. Well, it's year 2 is expecting a little too well. Georgia went 8-5 in Kirby Smart's first year, and then was in the title game the next year. Sure. So why shouldn't I expect that at Notre Dame? Right.
Well, and that's the other part of it, right? I mean, it's Notre Dame's schedule. I honestly, like we've talked a bunch about, okay, they're 13th in the AP, they're here, they're there, they're whatever. Honestly, I think they should be between 8 and 12, but at the same time, I don't care because
13 was my floor for where they should be ranked. So I'm okay with both of those rankings. They still have a lot to prove.
And that's the thing. Yeah. They have everything in front of them to prove who they are. And that's, in my opinion, that's perfect. That's exactly where you want to be.
And that's the big thing right there, Vince, is we're going to find out a lot about Marcus Freeman this year. Now, I'm not saying title game or bust for Freeman. If he doesn't get into the title game, he's a bust. That's what I mean by that. I'm not saying that. But if he is the coach that we think he is, or hope that he is, it's probably more hope he is right now, then we should see a big jump. And that's where I think people are missing the boat. And I've heard people say, well, we've never seen a second-year coach make that kind of jump who's never been a head coach before. Yeah, we have. We literally just saw it. We saw Kirby Smart, who had never been a head coach before at any level. He was a defensive coordinator for a few years. He was a little bit older as a football coach at the time. He was about 4 years older than Marcus Freeman was at the time. But he went out that season and went from 8-5 in year 1. Right. So, I mean, you look at Kirby Smart's first season at Georgia, 2016, they go 8-5. They lose at Ole Miss by 31. They lose a home game to Tennessee. They lost at home to Vanderbilt. Okay. Not James Franklin Vanderbilt, Derek Mason Vanderbilt. They lost at home. Then they lost by 2 touchdowns at Florida, or not at Florida, but in that, the what's it, the world's biggest cocktail party, right? Against Florida and Jacksonville is what they call it. And then they lost at home to Georgia Tech, right? I mean, so They lost to Paul Johnson. So you lost 5 games that first year, 3 at home to Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Georgia Tech. And the next year he goes out and they go to the national championship game, play for a national championship, beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame, beat Mississippi State, or ranked the Mississippi State team by 28. Got payback against Tennessee that year, 41-0 at Tennessee. Got payback against Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt, 45-14. Beat Florida, who beat them the year before by 2 touchdowns, 42-7. Beat Georgia Tech, who beat them the year before, 38-7. Right, and then they go play for the national championship that season. And then here's another example, okay? Because I always say the exceptions shouldn't prove the rule. Well, if there's only one time that's happened, then you can't point to it. I'll give you another example, and there's more I could give you. Bob Stoops, never been a head coach before, right? Takes over to Oklahoma in 1999. He's 39 years old, just a slightly older than Marcus Freeman. Goes 7-5 in his first season. They lost to Bob Davie and Notre Dame. Okay. They lost to Texas by 10. They lost to Colorado by 14. They lost to Texas Tech by 10. And they lost to Ole Miss in a bowl game. Goes out the next year in 2000, his second year, they go undefeated. Yeah. They beat Texas 63-14. Right. Let me remind you of the score the year before. Texas 38, Oklahoma 28, 10-point win. The next year, Texas 63, Oklahoma 14. They go at number 2 Kansas State, win 41-31. Play number 1 Nebraska at home, beat them 31-14. Go at Texas A&M, team that that they play, I think played the year before, beat them 35-31. Play Texas Tech at home. Now this is, if you remember, this was a pretty good Texas Tech era. It was a Mike Leach era. Wins 27-13, and you beat K-State again in the Big 12 title game, and then you play number 3 Florida State for the national championship, and you beat them, the defending national champion Florida State team. You go 12-0, 13-0, you win a national championship. Okay, so if you got the chops, you got the chops. And those teams, both of those teams were worse in year 1 than Notre Dame was last season. Mm-hmm. Went 9-4, 8-5, and 7-5 their first 2 seasons. So is it a thing where, am I saying, okay, well, Freeman, you better do that too, or you're a bum? No, what I'm saying is this is where I kind of get excited, but also where I say, if Marcus Freeman is who we think he is, there should be a jump this season. Does that mean all the way to national title? I'm not ready to go there, because Oklahoma brought in some JUCOs in 2000, and they did some things that Notre Dame wasn't able to do. But I'm like, but is that a whole lot different than Notre Dame being able to hit the transfer portal market to get Sam Hartman and Thomas Harper and Javonte Jean-Baptiste and some of these other guys? I don't think that it necessarily is. So I do think we should be able to say, hey, it is okay to expect a big jump in year 2. Why not? Mm-hmm. Why do we have to always accept that we're just not good enough? And I've heard a lot of that lately. And I think part of it is people just trying to get into situation, Vince, where like they just don't want to set themselves up to be let down. But I'm like, now is the time to be excited, right? Absolutely. Now is exactly the time to be excited. And if Marcus Freeman is who we think he is, we're going to see big progress this year. Is that going to be enough for a championship? I don't know. But we should definitely see a much better football team. The floor ties into this, Vince. If Marcus Freeman is who we think he is, then 10-2 should be the floor. Anything worse than 100%. That makes me say, because that means what? You went 1-2 against the big 3, which means no improvement. And you stubbed your toe against somebody else that you shouldn't stub your toe against. Right. I'm sorry. That's not, that barring just catastrophic injuries throughout the year. That's just, to me, I'm sorry. That's not enough of a jump if he is who I think he is. So I may have some like, well, I'm not ready to throw in the towel yet, because that'd be silly to just throw in the towel in year 2. But it would be more of like he's got some stuff to prove to me now. Like really has to prove to me now, because it's the first time I would ever have some, maybe he's not who I thought he was.
Sure.
But 10-2 to me is maybe a little bit of a, I wish they could have been better, but it's the jump that you need to, especially if it's followed by a major bowl, because 10-2 gets Notre Dame into a major bowl game. Absolutely. And if they can then win that, you're like, you know what? They're on their way. It didn't end the way I'd hoped that it would end, but they're on their way.
But I love the momentum moving forward.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
the needle is still pointing up.
Exactly.
You know
and
what I
you
mean?
get a softer schedule in 2024, and you're going to lose some guys. But now all of a sudden, Notre Dame becomes a much more attractive portal option for teams.
Right.
Hey, look what Sam Hartman did. You know, look what Thomas Harper did. Look what Javante Jean-Baptiste went from a backup at Ohio State to part of a really good team at Notre Dame. Now all of a sudden, you're able to get those reinforcements next year through the portal the way that they did this season. So it just builds that momentum, like you said. And then you bring in a second straight big-time recruiting class, and you start to feel better about the direction of the program.
Yes.
So to me, that's why I say 10-2 with a bowl win, to me, should really be, you know, where Notre Dame should be this year, minimum 10-2 in the regular season, and avoid the really bad losses, meaning like a blowout loss, you know, that kind of thing, a loss to a team that you just shouldn't lose to. How the heck did you look back at the end of the season and you're 10-2 and you're like, how the heck did they freaking lose to Navy or Central Michigan or Pitt or something like that? And you're like, man, if only. But that if only still is like, because they're playing so well in November that you're like, man, if they just want to have that September stub your toe, this would be a dangerous football team. If it's something like that, I'll look back at the end of the year and say, yeah, they took a big step this year. It's not as big as I wanted it, but they took a big step this year. And you start getting, you know, it solidifies, because I think that's where a lot of people are, Vince, right? Is I'm excited about this season, but because of the uncertainty, new quarterback, second-year coach, and all that, there's still a little bit of a, I just don't know who he is yet, kind of thing. And that's what's, because I am so optimistic about Coach Freeman.
Right.
I am optimistic, but I want to see it. Like somebody asked on Twitter today, what are you most excited about? Jill Savage asked us on Twitter, what are you most excited about this year? And my response was kind of, and I kept it more big picture, but it's like, we've done all the talk, and now it's like we're going to find out what, you know, what this really is. Yeah. And I'm excited to see what I hope that what we've seen in practice can translate onto Saturdays, because if it can, man, this team is going to be really fun to watch.
Well, I hope I am not going to get in trouble for this, but you know, you and I go to practice obviously together all the time, and you know, we always hang out together and we're watching stuff together and the whole thing. And you know, we're close to when Marcus Freeman's talking to the team at the beginning, and we can hear what he's talking about. And on more than one occasion, you've leaned over to me and you've said, man, I hope he's who we think he is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, because
you hear him talking, Vince, and it's like, I want to throw my helmet on.
Yes.
And put my shoulder pads on and go out and play. Whereas with the previous coach, it was always like, this is so planned and telegraphed. It's like, okay. It's like, whatever. And that's not a shot at the other coach. It's a freaking speech in practice. Like, I don't expect the coach to make it wrong. But when a coach can do that, you're like, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Tuesday afternoon, and this guy has me wanting to put pads on my fat butt and go out there and play football for the 3 reps before I die. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, we believe that Marcus Freeman is the right guy for this job, and we believe that he's doing things the right way. But now we have to see it throughout the season. You know what I mean? And that's, you know, you could take a negative spin to last year and the way that they lost to Stanford and the way that they lost to Marshall and how those games went down, where they were in the schedule, you know, all of those different things, you know, like, oh, well, they were too focused on Ohio State and then they had a huge letdown after, you know, and all of those things are true. Right. I get it. But I tend to look at the positives and how the season finished and what they've done in the offseason and the coaching hires that we think are really good and all of those things, but it has to translate to wins. I mean, and that's why when we talk about the floor and we talk about the ceiling and all of those things, I'm right with you. Like right now, when I say 10-2 for the 23 season, after everything that we've talked about throughout the offseason, you know, throughout last season, to be honest with you, with the transfer portal, all of those things, I say 10-2 and it kind of feels icky, like coming out of my mouth a little bit, because I feel like this team is better.
From a fan standpoint, especially. Yeah.
For
when
sure.
you look at it from a fan standpoint, Vince, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I am. For me, there's enough of the analyst hat still in me to where you start to say, yes, everything you said is true, but this is still a really tough schedule.
Oh, it is.
There's a lot of things they have to do that we haven't seen this program do in a very long time. And you start to kind of have a little bit of that BK PTSD that you start creating. Well, maybe they're just not as talented as we thought, or maybe they're not. Maybe this isn't, or maybe that is. And then you hear enough negativity that you're like, okay, am I wrong here? Am I the one that's off base here?
Right.
So I think there's at least enough of it, and there's also the realization that as much as I think this roster has come a long way, it's still not where it needs to be.
It's not a proven roster though,
right? And they still don't have like the edge players that are like the elite, like wow, I mean, they got guys that could be good players, good enough to go out and compete for championship, but not where it's like, okay, I know that guy's going to go out there and take over the USC game or the Ohio State game, right? We don't know that yet. Maybe Riley Mills can become that guy, but we don't know that yet. There's just enough unknowns to where I have to tamp down expectations because Notre Dame isn't Bama yet. They're not Georgia yet. They're not that team where they've got the proven track record where you can say this should be the expectation and anything short of that is a failure. Right.
Agreed.
That's my thing. They're just not there yet where that should be.
Yeah, no, I get that. I totally get where you're coming from. And but I mean 10-2 is my floor. And I think, and I'm talking regular season, obviously, because it's 12 games. So 10-2, so 10 wins if we're talking wins. And but there would have to be a win in a bowl game. Because I agree with you that 10-2 gets you into a New Year's Six. It will. I think it gets you into a big-time bowl game. You got to win it. You have to win it for me to feel any kind of good going into the offseason. Because if they go 10-2, whatever those two losses are, whether it's one to the big boys and maybe a stub your toe or whatever, if you lose that bowl game, it's a completely different feeling going into the offseason. Even with the great class they were about to sign in 24, all of that, it's like, oh, man.
Can I throw out a potential caveat that I want you to respond to, Vince?
Okay.
I would say that I agree with you in theory.
Okay.
With one exception. If for some reason they're playing Georgia in a bowl game
that's not a college football playoff,
knockdown, drag out, 60-minute, back and forth, great game that Georgia wins on a late field goal, I'll still be like, man, you got to start winning those games.
Right.
But I'll still feel like they took a big step.
Okay.
Because in order to get there, you would have had to have beat at least one of Clemson and Ohio State to get there.
Oh, sure.
So you could say, hey, look, we went 10-3. We went toe-to-toe with this team, toe-to-toe with this team, toe-to-toe with this team, beat that team. Yeah, we're closer than we were. You'll still have a little bit of a, but I don't know that I would say like to the point of what you were just saying. I think that would be the only exception. But if you go to a game like that and it's that type of game against Texas, I'm pissed. Right? If it's that kind of game against Washington, I'm not happy. And that's no disrespect to those teams. Penn State, Michigan, I'm not happy.
But those aren't powerhouses.
Georgia or Bama, then maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. That would be the only exception that I could maybe get. Or maybe it's a rematch in a bowl game over somebody that you beat in the right. Let's say for somehow, I don't know how it would even happen, but you get a rematch in a bowl game against Clemson. Right. And you beat them at their place by a field goal, and then they beat you. Something, I don't know, Vince. I'm just trying to think of like maybe possible scenarios. But that would be the exception. It would have to be like one of those two teams, and it'd have to be a knockdown drag out. But even then, as I'm saying it, I'm like, still don't feel great about it. But I just wouldn't be as down about it as maybe as I would be if it was like a loss to, Tennessee or something like that.
My only pushback to Georgia, and I've got a pushback on my pushback, but like Notre Dame has been toe-to-toe with Georgia in the past. Now, that wasn't the Georgia that it is now.
And it was still pretty good. It was the national runners-up.
Exactly. They were still really good.
It was a regular season game.
Okay.
The problem here's the thing that people don't give Brian Kelly enough credit for, actually. Brian Kelly's regular season losses to big teams were usually not blowouts. The Miami game was a little bit of an anomaly, and you had Stanford in 2010. The Stanford 2011 game was a 2-touchdown game, but Notre Dame was competitive with an inferior team that game, right? The next year they go out and beat Oklahoma on the road. They beat Stanford. Florida State, they lost to Florida State, who was number 1 at the time, but they lost by 4, should have won that game. Mm-hmm. A lot of their bad losses, like blowout losses, Clemson, he played them twice in the regular season, beat them once, without all those guys, but you still did what you needed to do. And then the other one in 2015 was on the road. You had a chance to tie it with less than a minute to go, right? So it's been the postseason where the embarrassment has come.
Yeah, true.
Right? That's
true.
what I'm saying, right? And so it would still be a baby step. It just
Yes.
wouldn't be the step that we hope it would be. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
To that?
I think that's fair because
your point is sound, Vince. Hey, dude, you went down to Georgia and lost by 6.
Right.
You had the ball with a minute
were
left
there.
to tie the game, right?
You had the ball to win.
Regular season in a month to prepare is a different animal from where Notre Dame has been in the past. That's
Absolutely.
all I would say.
I agree with wholeheartedly. And you could talk me into, depending on how that game goes, you could talk me into it being a step forward.
But it's a baby step, Vince.
But it's a baby step.
That I will say. It's absolutely a baby step.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
So if it's a 10-2 situation, I really expect a New Year's 6 win at that point. Yeah. You know what I mean? I just do. And
I'm going to throw another caveat in there, Vince. You have to beat Ohio State in that scenario where I'm okay losing to Georgia.
Yes. You can't lose.
I will say that. If you lose to let's say you get upset the next week by Duke and then you lose to Clemson by a field goal in November and then you okay, they're not there yet, but you beat Ohio State, you beat USC, you beat Clemson last year. You know what? They're getting closer.
Yeah.
It's a baby step, but it's still a step.
Right.
But here's the thing, though, Vince. If you go 10-2 and you get into that game and you beat a Bama, you beat a Georgia, you beat a Tennessee, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, right? So there are scenarios where Notre Dame is not a playoff team where they take a giant step towards the future.
Yeah.
Right. That's the reality of it. There is that scenario. So it's not championship or bust from the standpoint of did the program make a big step forward?
Mm-hmm.
Big picture, that's the truth. Now, from the Notre Dame standard, it's always championship or bust.
Of course.
But you have to be able to look at it from that way, which is a fair way, but also look at it as, okay, but where is the program headed? Yes, it didn't end the way that you wanted it to end, but they took a big step this year. You look at the schedule they played, look at who they beat. There's that opportunity. But, of course, right now, it's the time of the year where I want to see more than that, Vince. I want to see.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see the playoff game with a win.
If we really want to drill down into this, right? If we're talking 10-2, for example, but I see massive improvement from the offense, and I see, you know what I mean? Like we see different kind of game plans. We see different guys getting involved. We see these younger guys really taking steps forward. A lot of production from maybe the freshmen or first year players. Sophomore, redshirt freshmen, those kind of guys. We really see those guys take a step. Then you could potentially convince me that they're moving in the right direction, right? And it just wasn't time for those guys to make the move to beat some of those other guys, the big teams. So, that if you really drill down, and we're seeing a lot of growth and movement across the board on the roster, and then you're going to infuse the roster with this 24 class that's really, really good. Okay, I could start to get on board with that. But I still, nobody's going to convince me otherwise that 10-2 is the floor for the regular season. And that's, we can argue semantics if that actually happens.
One of the questions was this, right, Vince? Somebody says, isn't it a step forward for Coach Freeman if he wins all the games he should but loses to the big three? No, it's not.
No.
Because, look, I understand where he's coming from. Because, hey, look, last year you did stub your toe. But to me, in year 2, you shouldn't be making the same mistakes you made in the first 4, 5, 6 games of your first season, right? Because to me, yes, you did better on beating the teams you're supposed to, but that's not the standard for Notre Dame. If you lose to all the big teams, then basically what you've done is you're Brian Kelly, right? And that's not what you were brought here to be.
And he beat a big boy last year.
Exactly.
He beat Clemson and he beat
3
the crap
touchdowns.
out of them.
Exactly.
And if you don't beat any of the big 3 this time, that's a step backwards.
Right.
Because you didn't beat any of them.
Correct.
And he did before. So
yes, but I understand where Tanner's coming from.
Yes, I get that part of it.
But see, that's where the 10-2 comes from, Tanner. Because if it's 10-2, you go 1-2 against the big boys. They're competitive games, but then you beat all the teams you're supposed to beat. Okay, that's a step forward.
Sure,
that is. Is it a big step forward? No, but it's a step forward. But it's got to finish with that bowl victory. So I'm sympathetic to where you're coming from, Tanner. But to me, for 10-2. To be considered a step forward, for the season to be considered a step forward, you've got to have the 10 wins, because that means you beat the team. You're supposed to beat the teams you're supposed to beat.
Right.
Like, you don't get a pat on the back at Notre Dame for not losing to Marshall and Stanford. not losing to Navy and Central Michigan and Tennessee State and Pitt, right? You don't get a pat on the back for that. That's what you're supposed to do.
Well, you do if you're Brian Kelly. We pat him on the back for that.
He pats himself on the back for that.
Couldn't help.
We can be a preview show if we don't take a couple little fun little jabs at the old coach. But yeah, Vince, so that to me, just big picture, that's where we are with this football team. That should be the expectation. And so why does it matter that we set that expectation? Well, it matters because as we evaluate this football team through the course of the season, the post-game shows and the pre-game shows and the predictions and all those kind of things, it's through the lens of that being the expectation.
Right.
And we're going to find out here if they can live up to that expectation. That's going to be the fun part of this whole thing.
Right.
And that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing.
So do you want to jump into now with our season prediction, or do you want to jump into some more individual kind of awards?
Let's ask the folks. Do you guys want to hear us first go through the season and kind of predict our records and make sort of our Notre Dame prediction, then do the individual awards? Or do you guys want to hear the individual predictions first and then kind of climax with the overall team predictions? So we'll let you all in the chat here respond real quick, Vince.
Because we're also going to talk about who we think is going to be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and we'll do that at the end.
That kind of stuff. So
because we finally hammered in through those. So because like that's kind of part of the fun of this, Vince, is to kind of sit there and say, well, what are going to be, let's lead to it a little bit. So most people so far are going with team. Some are saying let it build. Individual. It's a good split here, Vince.
Yeah, it is.
It's a good little split. It's a good little split here as we kind of go through that. But the way that we had originally structured it was just do the season predictions first. But I kind of feel like maybe Vince, I'll let you decide, man. I'm always making the decisions. I'm gonna let you decide how you want to go through.
I think we should do the overall season at the end. And let it build. Let it build, because then we do the season, then we do like conference champions, college football playoff. Like those are the kind of the big ones.
So we're gonna go individual stuff first, then the Notre Dame prediction, then playoff, and then
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Because I don't want to give anything away to what our college football playoff might be.
Okay.
Just
all right.
saying.
Let's do it. So let's quickly roll through these, Vince. Let's go individual records, individual stuff first. So we're gonna go overall team MVP.
Well, if Notre Dame's going to have the season that I think that they're going to have, and you also have to take a look at this from the lens of the outside world, right? And it's not necessarily from a coaching standpoint.
I don't give a crap about the outside world.
Well, that's how I picked them. Okay. To me, MVP is it's going to be an offensive player. If you're winning a bunch of games, it's going to be an offensive player, and it's going to be the person that people perceive to be the most important to make that offense tick. I went with Sam Hartman. Because
what's the thing? It's the most valuable.
Correct.
I don't believe Sam Hartman will be Notre Dame's best player this season, right? I mean, I think that's going to probably be Joe Alt.
That's fair,
right? But it's most it could, Benjamin Morrison's probably a better player. There, I can think of 5 or 6 guys that would be better players than him, especially pro prospects and all that. But it's about valuable,
right?
And I can't sit here and say here's the thing. I've already said during the season or during this last couple of weeks that I have Notre Dame in the college football playoff. You already know that that's where I'm at, right? Now we'll see where Vince is at, but I've already said that. I spoiled that a little bit. So we've always said Notre Dame's a quarterback short of making these type of runs. Well, I don't think this team is capable of making that kind of run if Sam Hartman's not your MVP.
Right.
So I just, again, valuable,
easy for
not
me.
Most outstanding.
Right.
That's
most
coming
valuable.
Next. We're going to do those next.
Right. Absolutely.
But valuable. It's got to be the quarterback, in my opinion.
Yep. No doubt about it. He's the difference maker as far as where this team is at. You know what I mean? And again, they've been a quarterback shy of doing some really great things. And look, they've made it to the college football playoff with subpar quarterback play. I mean, that's just those are just facts.
I would argue. I disagree with that in one regard because I think the best football Ian Book ever played was 2018. He was really good in 2018 until the playoff.
Right.
But I mean, look, in his 8 starts in the regular season, that kid averaged over 300 passing yards a game and averaged like 8.9 yards per attempt. That's outstanding football. And he took an offense that was barely scoring over 20 points a game against Vanderbilt and Ball State, and immediately they started scoring over 40 a game. Right. So I'll say that during the regular season, that is true. That is not true. I think Ian Book played out. If Ian Book would have played in the playoff game the way he did in the regular season, that's a much more entertaining game.
Sure.
It's just that he regressed every year after that. So in 2020, I would agree with you. But in 2018, I got to give Ian his due. Ian was really good in 2018. I mean, again, you don't average 300 yards a game over 8 starts against that schedule if you're not playing pretty good football.
Right. So, and then they decided RPOs were not part of the offense.
Which they ran in 2018.
That's what I'm saying.
Me nuts, man.
Which is what, and that was in his wheelhouse of things that he was good at. You know, quick read, just boom.
Right.
It is what it is right now. Quick read, boom, get it out of your hands or keep it or hand it. Like, that's Ian's wheelhouse.
Well, yeah, and I've seen people, somebody just said this in the chat as well, that the Northwestern game jacked him up, and I don't agree with that. I mean, look, he went out there the next week and threw for 292 yards against Syracuse the week after the injury. He went out against USC and threw for 352 yards against USC. The throw he made to Chris Fink for a touchdown in the first half of that game was one of the best throws, if the best throw he ever made. So I think what jacked Ian Book up was the playoff game, and he never really mentally recovered from that, and neither did Brian Kelly. But I don't think it was the rib injury that jacked him up, because he averaged like 325 yards in the next 2 games out of that. And he did that, Vince, against the Northwestern team that, if people remember correctly, in that 2018 season, Northwestern ended up playing for the Big Ten championship that season.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's kind of my thing, is that was a team that was a pretty good football team. Went on the road and beat Iowa the next week. Almost beat Michigan earlier in the year. So I'm going to somewhat push back on that. But your point about 2008-20 is absolutely correct. He was an average quarterback that season. And in 2019, he was an average quarterback against anybody with a pulse. But in 2018, Ian Book was a really good player.
Fair enough. I give credit where credit's due. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So who is your most outstanding player on all? So we're going to talk about most outstanding, right?
So yeah, you had top players, so I named a couple of different guys. And so are we just doing one guy? Because I can definitely narrow it down.
And what I'd like to do is for the most outstanding is just to set what it means is this is just the best player, the guy that has the best season, not the most talented player, the best pro prospect, but who is the most out. When you look at the season, like, dude, that guy was dominant, right? Like Eddie George won the Heisman in '95, but their most outstanding player was Orlando Pace.
Right.
He was never going to win a Heisman because he played offensive line. But when you watch that team play, I'm sorry, I love Eddie George. He was a monster that year, but he was a monster because he was running behind Orlando Pace.
Yeah.
Who was still the best offensive tackle, if not offensive lineman I've ever seen in my life in college football. Quentin Nelson probably second. He was phenomenal. So it's just most outstanding. And that's like, for me, you know, I thought about Audric Estime. I thought about making like a projection of a Chris Tyree, but at the end of the day, the best left tackle in college football plays for Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
And as I said, Sam Hartman's going to be MVP. But when we watch this season, you know, Audric's going to put up his yards and this and that. But the most outstanding player, their best player, their most dominant player is, my prediction is it's going to be Joe Alt.
Yep.
That's where I'm at.
100%. That's what I would have picked as well. I mean, it's him, and then there's a bit of a gap, and then there's a couple of other guys.
Just Audric's probably next for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
He, you know, maybe Chris Tyree, Sam Hartman now starts getting in the conversation after Alt.
Yep.
You know, and
if we're projecting, I think
Audric,
Tyree there's an argument to be made for Chris Tyree, and I've got him under another category.
Yeah.
You know, coming up. But yeah, I mean, it's Joe Alt and everybody else. I mean, that's the be all end all. He's going to get drafted the highest next, you know, in April. You know, he is their best player, and it's great that they have him. Let's just put it that way. I'm very happy that he's suiting up in the blue and gold. There's no doubt about that. So let's go defense. This one, I think, is also fairly cut and dry. But I'm curious.
Vince is going to get so ripped by all of you when he makes his pick.
What?
I'm looking at the. I love your pick, Vince. It's not me. I love your pick. At least how you have him ranked.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna give mine first.
Yeah.
Mine's a little bit of a surprise as well.
Okay.
I like Cam Hart to be their most outstanding because and here's the reason I say that. I don't think teams are just going to throw at Benjamin Morrison a ton.
Yeah.
I think they're going to try to avoid him, and they're going to give Cam a lot of chances. If Cam can stay healthy for an entire season, I think by the end of the year, people are going to be talking about Cam Hart. And my runner-up is actually Riley Mills as far as most outstanding. And now you could say Benjamin Morrison, because he's so good, has led to some of that other stuff, and you'd be very fair. But I have a feeling about Cam Hart this year, Vince. If he can stay healthy,
Sure, and that's big.
I think he's going to be outstanding.
And that's, you can see the ranking that I had basically, and Cam Hart's on my list. How could I not have Cam Hart on my list? I mean,
are the president of the Cam Hart fan club,
card carrying member, folks,
yes.
And we have jackets. All right, so there's no doubt about that. Cam Hart was absolutely 100% on my list. I just think this team rises and will rise and fall defensively on the shoulders of JD Bertrand. And I know I'm going to get pushback on that, and I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that.
Can I ask a question, Vince, of this
Sure.
just real quick? Because I want you to explain. Are you looking at this as JD being the most valuable player on defense or most outstanding player on defense?
I think
and if
both.
you are going with the most outstanding, is it because you think his production is going to be insane, or because you think he's just going to play at such a high level? So those would be my questions.
Yeah.
Because I'm very high on JD Bertrand.
Sure.
But I thought that was a bit of a, that's interesting.
No, and that's fair. I just think that you could make a case, obviously, for MVP because I think he's the leader of that defense.
That I would agree with wholeheartedly.
If
we're talking MVP on defense, it's got to be your Mike linebacker.
Right.
I mean,
I'm with
you on that.
He exemplifies what a Mike linebacker is, right? And there's no doubt about that. But I also think his production is going to take a step in the right direction. I think he's going to make plays when it matters the most. I really do. And I think people are going to be like, man, I can't believe I was dogging JD Bertrand for 2 years. This defense would be nowhere without him. I think that's what's going to end up happening because here's one of the reasons why. I think Notre Dame's secondary is going to be really, really good. And I'll include the safeties in that as well. And starting at the corners, obviously, but then Xavier Watts and I think Ramon Henderson and whoever else they put back there with them. I think secondary is going to be really, really good. You may be
the president of the Cam Hart fan club, but you're the treasurer for the Xavier Watts fan club.
Oh,
there's no doubt about that.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think a lot of teams are going to be like, well, we can't throw against these guys. We're going to have to run the ball. And I think that's going to put JD in an opportunity to really make a lot of plays in the run game. And that's, again, bring on the pushback, but I'm a huge JD Bertrand fan with where he is with his game right now. I think he's going to be a difference maker all year. And you know what? It's going to start week 1. And I realize it's the option. I get that. But there was a lot of wringing of hands against Navy last year in the second half. The defense didn't play well. There's no doubt about it. One of the main reasons the defense didn't play well is JD Bertrand was a scratch at the last second. And they kind of had to rethink how they were going to run their defense against Navy. And it didn't work great in the second half. Watch the difference with JD Bertrand in the middle against this Navy offense. I'm telling you, it's going to be a big, big difference.
Okay, I dig it.
So there you go. I liked it where we were different. I like it. But I had Ben Morrison second. So
you had Cam Hart third. So I was like, okay. Interesting.
So
Can I say this? If at the end of the year, if JD Bertrand is Notre Dame's most outstanding player by the end of the year, this is going to be one heck of a freaking defense. Because here's my point to that, Vincent. You and I talked about this last week. JD Bertrand can't be that if the D line's not balling out. That's just a fact. I don't matter how good you are as a linebacker. I pointed this out. Go watch the one game that Notre Dame in 2008, 2012. Look at the one game that Notre Dame played a half of football without Lewis Nix. Manti Te'o was the best linebacker Notre Dame had in a long time. And honestly was better over a longer period of time than even Jalen Smith or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, because they had 2 great years. He had 3 great years, right? That's why he's like number 2 all time, number 2 or 3 all time in tackles in his career, right? But the one half of football where there was no Lewis Nix, which is against Pitt, Manti was not doing a whole lot because they were just getting him, chopping him. So JD can't have that type of 110 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 3 or 4 sacks, 8 pass breakups if the D-line's not dominant. Manti was phenomenal in 2012, but he was able to be phenomenal because of how good the defensive line was. Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix, Capron, Lewis Moore, and Danny Spahn were the 2 most underrated and underappreciated players from that 2012 defense. They were excellent that year, especially Cap.
Yeah.
And so when you watch them, yes, Manti was phenomenal. He was their heart and soul of that team, but he could only be that because of the play of the defensive line. You had
There's no
Sheldon Day
doubt.
on that team, Kona Schwenke, the
Yep.
late Kona Schwenke, Tony Springman. Those guys gave good minutes, but man, when Lewis was not on that defensive line, when Stephon went out the next year against Pitt, you started to see those type of things. Notre Dame had bad luck against Pitt back then on the defensive line. Lewis gets out the first half, and Stephon gets ejected the next year. So anyway, yes. So that's a great sign, Vince. That's a great sign. If JD's putting up those numbers, it means Riley and Howard and Onye and Rubio and
that's part of the reason
big time playing big time
you are 100% accurate, because that's part of the reasons I went this route, because I have a lot of faith in the depth of the defensive line and what they're going to be able to do. It doesn't matter how good you are at Mike linebacker or any linebacker if you're trying to fend off guards and tackles all the time. They have to, the defensive line has to eat up space to allow the linebackers to roam. If JD Bertrand can roam untouched, he's going to be really, really good, folks. I'm telling you, keep an eye out. The defensive line is going to do their job, and they're going to allow these linebackers to move and scrape and get downhill and make plays. And you're going to also see how fast JD Bertrand is, folks. We've seen it with our own eyes at practice. We've seen it in games as well. I know some people like to block out the good stuff, but this man can move sideline to sideline. You're going to see him make some plays with his speed, and it's going to be fantastic. And I'm cutting those plays, and I'm going to be putting them on my profile or something just to make sure everybody knows about it. But
we'll certainly talk about it upon further reviews. But yeah.
But anyway.
You ready to move on to the next one, Vince?
100%. So we're going to do newcomers, top newcomers. Are we just doing one on offense, one on defense?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about who your candidates are, but I think for me on offense, it's pretty easy for me, honestly, at this point in time. I mean, as much as I love Rico Flores, it's hard for me to go anywhere. And when we talk newcomers, we're talking about new freshmen. We're talking about freshmen. So we maybe could have said like top freshmen. And we actually do the whole thing where we actually count freshmen who are actually freshmen, not redshirt freshmen who are sophomores. It's for me, it's Jaden Greathouse. And look, I love Rico. You know, I wouldn't be shocked at all if we're seeing Jeremiah Love out there balling at some point in time. I won't be shocked if at some point in time we see Charles Jagasol out there. We saw Cooper Flanagan running a little bit with the twos today because of some of the injuries at tight end. This is a really talented freshman class. I just think the best of the best is going to be Jaden Greathouse, just from an opportunity standpoint. But even just today, like, you know, he had a route today where he just really beat Thomas Harper off the ball. Thomas Harper's a good football player that was great in the Big 12 last year. Yeah. And he comes down with the catch and he's going down, and Thomas Harper has to literally make the best play I've ever seen that kid make to knock the ball out of his hands late. Like, that's what it takes for you to not get beat by Jaden Greathouse. It's just a phenomenal play, right? And so I'm going him. I think that for him, there's also going to be more of a rotation in the slot than there will be outside. So I could see it being Rico. You know, Rico get his chances. It could be Rico if there's an injury outside. That's where Rico could step in and maybe make more plays. But I just think right now Jaden Greathouse is the guy in best position to be that guy for Notre Dame.
He's, and you've said it before when we're at practice, I mean, he is an outstanding route runner, and not just as a freshman. He's an outstanding route runner, period.
Yeah.
And he's only going to get better at that. I mean, his top ends are only going to get better than they are now.
Yeah. He's not going to regress as a route runner most likely.
Exactly. He's only going to get better. And Chancey Stuckey is just, I mean, the kid's going to be a sponge. Chancey Stuckey, like, you love kids like that come in with just a great foundation, and then he's just going to tweak it and make it so much better. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know how you could go with anybody else at this particular time. I think that Jaden Greathouse, because he's going to get on the field. I mean, I have high expectations for Chris Tyree. He's obviously the starting slot, and deservedly so. But Jaden Greathouse is going to get on the field a lot as a true freshman, and he's going to make plays.
And that's where we talk about opportunity.
You're right.
It's going to take probably some injuries early for Jeremiah Love to get that kind of volume, right? That's just the reality of it. The thing is, they have plenty of freshmen that could be that.
Right.
I mean, that's where the talent plus the opportunity is there more for Jaden Greathouse than anybody else. And I think he's going to step up and take full advantage. Vince, I kind of messed with you a little bit on defense because I kind of changed on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you did.
So I'll go ahead and do the defensive one first because I know your guys were the newcomers. Because if we were going to go newcomers, I think that's an easy one. It's Thomas Harper.
100%.
Right? Like, that's not even close for me.
Right.
It's Thomas Harper.
Yeah.
That's an easy one. let's go freshman, though. I think that's going to take a little bit more projection.
It is.
So I think the most physically impressive freshman we've seen so far in fall camp has actually been Drake Bowen. I mean, he's just been a dude, but I can't pick him to be the best freshman. When he plays, he's the backup to the guy that we both think is going to be the team's most productive guy linebacker.
Right.
So it would take some sort of injury for him to be that guy. Yeah. I really think Christian Gray is going to be hard to keep off the field this year, Vince. Sure. I really do. I just think it's going to be really hard to keep him off. I could see Jaden Greathouse or Jaden Alsbury step in at some point in time and making a ton of plays. I could see Drake Bowen if there's an injury. You know, Brennan Vernon and Boubacar have both shown some flashes. Don Schuler's impressed me of late. But, I mean, Christian Gray right now is probably going to play the most in the first couple games. But, man, he has been so good. And you saw they put a clip out today from the Notre Dame practice.
Okay.
Where Rico went against Christian Gray and he just dominated Rico. And then it actually was a great shot of it, Vince, because it was a play going. So the offense was coming in on the first field. So the first turf field. So the defensive field, that makes more sense. The defensive field, yep. They were coming into the end zone near the street.
Oh, okay.
And so I was on looking out at I was on in between the two fields. I was over there in the end zone and the play was on the other side. So I could see that Christian did it, but I couldn't see it as well as when they showed the clip. Christian rode Rico all the way out, then turns back, finds the ball, reaches out and sees it and breaks it up. Like, dude, that's a grown man play right there.
Right. He's getting more and more comfortable too, because he looked a little lost at the beginning of fall camp, but he has just gotten better and better and better.
Quickly caught on. Yeah, because he was shaking off some of the rust because he missed half of spring practice.
Sure, yeah.
But there's also going to be more opportunities for him this year as well.
True.
Because they do want to have a rotation at cornerback.
Right.
And he's played well enough to where I think they're much more comfortable having Clarence Lewis be more of a nickel slot guy with Thomas Harper to keep both of those guys fresh. So I think Christian Gray is going to be that guy, in my opinion.
I tend to agree with you, but just for the sake of the fact that when I saw him in person, my mouth literally hit the turf. And I'm going to go with Brennan Vernon. And I realize there's a lot of dudes on the defensive line. I get it. The depth there is crazy. But this kid, if you saw him in person, you'd be like, there is no chance that this kid is a true freshman. There's just no chance. He looks like a grown man child. And he
literally looks older in the face than Nana or Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And that 100%. Dude's a 60. Those are 5th and 6th year seniors.
Yes.
Brennan Vernon looks like he's a 29-year-old grizzled NFL vet, just physically. You know what I mean? Like
correct.
He is a
look,
beard, grown. I mean,
he's a bit of a mess technically, and I get that. He's a true freshman. I'm not overly surprised by that. But from a physical standpoint, he's still pushing people around. I mean, he's just so strong. He's put together.
That's a nice way of saying that, Vince. He's a bit of a mess, technically. I mean, that's putting it kind. But to your point, though, Vince, I'm messing with you a little bit. But to your point, when that gets coached up.
Right. Like I could see him being a second half of the season rotation guy and making some plays. You know what I mean? And so I agree with
Vince. He could just play 4 games and take a red shirt, but ball out in those 4 games. You're like, this dude was really good.
100%.
Remember when Foskey did that in his first year in 2019? Where he only played in 4 games, but like in one of those games, he blocked a punt for a touchdown. Remember that?
Yes,
in 2019. We're like, hey, look, this dude's going to be pretty freaking good. It could be something like that, Vince.
Yeah,
I mean, so
absolutely.
I'm
absolutely. I agree with you. Christian Gray would be my pick because I think he's going to see the field first. And I get that, but just for the fun of it, I'm going to go with Brennan Vernon just because of who he is, what he looks like, and the potential that he could possibly have. And look, if he can get on the field and be productive, that means his fundamentals have gotten markedly better, right? And that also means Coach Washington has coached him up.
Right.
And that would be awesome to see, overall from a depth standpoint and all of it. So, so I'm going to go with him just for fun.
I dig it.
Yeah.
I dig it.
So our next category is breakouts. And I don't know if you want to comment on exactly what our definition of
Yeah, a
breakouts is,
breakout
but
can be one of two things. It could be a
okay.
guy who didn't play a ton last year that becomes a very valuable part of the offense. Doesn't even have to be like the leading receiver. It doesn't even have to go be a breakout to be an All-American. Just a guy who maybe didn't do much, who becomes a very important part of your offense, right? Or
Yeah.
defense. It could be a guy that was a starter and a good player that becomes a great player.
Yeah.
It can be one of those two things.
Yeah.
And so it can be a lot of different things, Vince. And we're actually on the same page
Are we?
on these predictions. Yeah.
Okay.
These are ones that we have in store. So
Yeah.
you want to start with offense?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can definitely start with offense. I think, I mean, if we're just looking from a straight up production standpoint, right? Tobias Merriweather had 1 catch for 1 touchdown last year. And I mean,
he can have 10 catches and it's like he had 10 times. That's a breakout. How many other freshmen had 10 times the production last year?
Right. I mean, so
that's
just
not
like
what
the
we're doing, folks,
statistical.
by the way, we think he's going to have a few more than 10 catches.
Yes. I think he's gonna lead the team in yards at the end of the day. I think Thomas is gonna lead the team in catches. But I think Tobias has the potential to lead the team in yards when it's all said and done. Just taking the top off the defense, and all these different things. I just think Tobias, if we think that this offense is going to be elite, and I think this offense has the opportunity to be elite, Tobias has to be elite. That's the be all end all for me. I think I know what I'm going to get from Thomas. I think I know what I'm going to get from Tyree. I do. I think I know what I'm going to get from Colsey. I think I know what I'm going to get from Great House.
I don't think we know what we're going to get from Colsey. That's part of the problem.
Well,
unless
I'm saying
he's going to be an inconsistent player, but I get your point.
I'm saying I know what we're going to get from him, that he's going to be inconsistent. Like that's kind of where I'm at with that. But
I just hope he's a gamer. That's what I'm hoping.
Sure,
the issue is
absolutely.
Because
hey, go out and catch some third downs. Help move the chains. The kind of the stuff that he was doing at times last year. I'd be fine with that. But Tobias needs to be a dude. Like if this offense is going to be anywhere close to elite, Tobias has to be a dude. And I think he's going to break out and be that dude at the end of the day.
I don't think the only thing I push back on is I don't think they need him to be elite to be great this year. I don't think they need any receiver necessarily to be elite. They just need him as a whole to be pretty good, because I think they're going to be elite at quarterback, elite on the, at certain parts of the offensive line. They're going to have a great run game. I don't need necessarily anyone to be elite, just be really good across the board. But I do think they need him to be a playmaker.
He has to be a weapon.
Right.
I mean,
yes.
Yeah,
now that could mean 400 catches for 750 yards. It could mean something like that, right?
Sure.
Where he catches 40 catches, 750 yards, Vince, that's a little under 20 a catch, right? I'm trying to do the math in my head, and that's a little bit too big of a math problem for me to be doing during the show, but that's 18.8 yards per catch. And he does that for 6 or 7 touchdowns. That's playmaker in this offense, right? Because you said you're going to have the tight ends are going to produce, right?
Sure.
I contemplated putting Holden Stace in my breakout player, to be completely honest with you. I thought about him.
Well, he's already broken out for me. Like I did not anticipate him. I think he's probably the number 1 tight end right now.
Yeah, but he's got to break out on Saturdays.
For sure. Yeah.
Right.
But like he has surprised me, but then now he's been consistent about it in practice. Still got to do it in a game. Yeah.
But I thought about having him there. I did think about Jadarian Price, who's another guy you considered. I just don't know if the opportunities are going to be there with how good everyone else is. I think a guy that could be considered a breakout that we're not talking enough about is Jabron Payne.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see Jabron Payne emerging as that number 2 back that has 500 or 600. A guy had 2 carries for 5 yards last year. I could see him being a 500+ yard rusher this year if the opportunity is there. And I'll say this: if God forbid something were to happen to Audric Estime and Jabron Payne's your starting running back for 10+ games this year, he's gonna have 1,000 yards.
Yeah,
in my opinion. I mean, he'll have a shot. He could look a lot like maybe what Audric did last year. 900 and 800 for your top 2 backs. But I think he could be a guy. We could be talking about Rocco maybe at guard being that guy. We could talk about Blake Fisher if he's able to just become an elite type of guy. At the end of the day, my prediction is and I don't really care about what people say in practice. I watched them in practice today, and I watched them beat Benjamin Morrison pretty soundly. The next route that Benjamin beat him on, Benjamin read it really well. It was a quick in cut, and he read it perfectly. There's not a lot a receiver can do against it. When a DB reads a quick route, it's over. But I watched him
down. Yeah,
I watched him compete against Benjamin to not he knocked that ball down because Benjamin should have picked it off. But Tobias knocked it down, and he got his little back. But he beat him pretty consistently on the first one. And so, I think having to go against Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison every single day
Yep.
is going to make him so ready for the season. I mean, it's going to be until week 3 at the earliest that he plays against anyone in the same universe as those two guys.
Mm-hmm.
NC State's got a couple good corners. Ohio State's got some good corners. He's going to play some guys, but he will not play a cornerback tandem, in my opinion, as good as the one he's just spent the last month battling against.
Absolutely.
So it's why I have high expectations for Tobias. But there's several candidates we could go with, but to me, that was a no-brainer. Defensively, Vince, it's the same thing. It's Xavier Watts.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a no-brainer for me. Look, there are plenty of guys we could talk about. I mean, I think if we're going to talk perception, if JD Bertrand has the season you're talking about, he will be a national breakout.
Sure.
But we've already had him in another category, and I think you and I think his breakout to me was the second half of last season for me. When you just look at his production, the volume of his production over a 6-game period, the way he played, he's already kind of had a breakout, even though it wasn't a season-long breakout.
Sure.
It was we saw him do it enough week after week after week after week in the last half of the season to say, okay, he's already broken out for me a little bit. But the national perception of him will change.
Exactly.
Right?
Absolutely.
But if I'm just looking at who's the breakout that's going to impact this football team, it's hard for me to go anywhere but Xavier Watts. I mean, I contemplated Jordan Patelho because if he can continue what he did the second half of last season, I thought about Riley Mills in this category too. Riley Mills, there's a lot of guys we could look at, Vince, but I think Xavier Watts is the guy I'm going with. I said it was a no-brainer, and then I immediately talked myself out of saying it was a no-brainer. But, I mean, Jordan Patelho and Riley Mills, I'll say this. I'm picking Xavier Watts. I hope it's one of the two linemen. That's where I'm at.
Okay.
I hope it's one of those two offensive linemen or one of the defensive linemen, because if they're the breakouts this season, this team's going to be really, really flipping good.
Because you need the defensive line to be good, especially if I'm predicting that JD Bertrand is going to be the top performer on defense, all of those different things. They have to be good. And, I have neglected the defensive line in a lot of these categories, to be honest with you. I'm just confident in the depth, and I don't care who breaks out down there. Somebody's going to. I just don't know who it's going to be, to be honest with you. I had, Xavier Watts was obviously my number one. Jason Onye was one of the people that I considered. Patelho was a guy that I considered, even though I didn't write it down. All of those guys are guys that I consider. But Xavier Watts, I think I was looking at it from a point of, okay, he started last year. He didn't even start the whole year, did he? Or did he start the whole year, Brian?
Who, Xavier Watts?
Yeah.
Last 3 or 4 games.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, because Brandon Joseph was primarily out there with DJ Brown most
That's
of the
right.
year.
That's right. So he started last year, but I think he kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Like, I think he is going to break out nationally. I think we've talked about him enough that the Notre Dame fans know about Xavier Watts and what he brings to the table, because we've talked about him a bunch. You know what I mean? But nationally, nobody knows who zero on defense is. They don't. They're going to. I firmly believe Xavier Watts is going to be taking a step, because teams are going to know what Notre Dame has on the outside, and they're going to try to pick on the safeties. And Xavier Watts is going to make them pay. I'm telling you, He's going to make them pay, and he's going to make a name for himself. And I'm going to really enjoy it.
Vince, I just got a text message from someone who thinks actually that person should be the president of the Cam Hart Fam Club. I'm going to demote you to VP.
Ouch!
I'll share that with you after the show. You'll understand.
Okay.
You're
Fair
now
enough.
VP.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Yeah.
So,
but this is the thing though, Vince. Right? Is like we're talking a lot about the D line and those kind of things. But here's the thing that has me kind of fired up about this football team. Is it's no longer the D line needs to play well to protect the secondary. It's now the secondary can be used in a way that amplifies the D line. You can be more aggressive with your pressures and in these type of things, maybe take some more chances because you have Cam Hart, because you have Benjamin Morrison. Look, Vince, there are a lot of seasons in the last 15, 20 years of being a Notre Dame football fan where Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray as starters on this football team would have me very excited.
Yeah.
As starters on this football team.
No doubt.
And then backups. I've pointed this out. We pointed this in the show with Ryan. Clarence Lewis started for Notre Dame on a playoff team 3 years ago. and he's not even in your top 3, arguably not even in your top 4 the way that Christian Gray is playing right now.
Sure.
I know the staff loves Clarence Lewis, and they're going to find a way to play him. But my whole thing is, hey, we've thought he should be a guy that gets moved from the outside anyway. This could be a blessing in disguise, because I've always felt if you move Clarence Lewis into the nickel, into the safety, that guy can be a dude. I really believe that.
We talked about that for a while. Yeah.
So this could be a blessing where you finally get a chance to put Clarence, because we've never said Clarence isn't a good football player. I just don't think Clarence. That's the big thing with him, is like there's Clarence Lewis playing in Bob Dacco's defense at corner would have been really good, because it's a zone team. He'll come up and tackle, rangy, that kind of stuff, right? So it's not, we don't think he's a good football player. Just this maybe lets you get him in positions where he is better. You know, he can be more physical in coverage and things like that. And so you can use that in ways to amplify the defense and to do more pressures, because you can protect it. Then if the defensive line is making plays, it only makes that secondary more dangerous. And I think the guy that could benefit the most, if the D-line is as good as we hope it can be, and it's still a hope because we need to see it in games, then all of a sudden now Xavier Watts is stepping in front of a couple, because the quarterback's just trying to get the dang ball out because he's tired of getting hit by Jordan Patelho and Josh Burnham and Riley Mills and Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onye and Howard Cross and those guys and the blitzers and, you know, that kind of stuff. And you know, it could certainly be there. But that's where it is really got to be, right? Is you've got to be in a situation where you know, they're you know, able to kind of go out there and just play off each other. That's the key. And that, I'm getting off track, but I'm excited about that. Let's go underrated next, Vince. Let's go with our rated guys next. I like your picks. Why don't you go ahead and give your two picks for this?
Yeah,
I think those are good.
This one was interesting for me. I only picked one from each side of the ball on this one. I really had to think, because, you know, at Irish Breakdown, we pretty much talk about everybody, and so it's really hard for me to like come up with who the underrated guys are. You know what I mean? Like, who are we underrating? And I don't think we have underrated these two particular guys, but I think nationally, and I think overall, that these guys have been a little bit underrated, because, you know, my first guy's going to be an offensive line. And when you think about Notre Dame offensive line, what do we talk about? Man, they're going to be really good tackle. We know who the tackles are going to be. All the competitions at guard, and, you know, we talk about guard a lot, and all things that happen. Reliable in the middle, Zeke Correll. And Zeke Correll is a guy that I am super excited to see play. He is a guy that I believe, Brian, if I'm not mistaken, he can come back for another year next year, but he's the center. He is the foundation of the offensive line. He's going to make sure that everybody's doing what everybody's supposed to be doing. And I think people take that for granted. And Zeke Correll has progressively gotten better and better and better as time has gone on. And I've been very happy to see it, because, look, he didn't do very well at guard. That's not his position. But when they moved him back to center, everything went well. And I think a lot of people, when they think of Zeke Correll, they think of what he looked like at guard. And he's a real good center, you know, and I think he's going to take another step this year. So I think he's underrated. I think he's the last guy people think about.
Yeah. So we need to do a check here, guys. So Vince, you need to go out of StreamYard. Apparently StreamYard's checking with both of us right now. There's not a lot we can do about it, guys. Both of our mics are going to go out at the same time and do different places. This is a StreamYard issue. I'm not sure if we're going to fix it. So again, folks, no, I'm not going to say it. Let me know if my sound is better now. If it's not, there's not a lot we can do about it. It's a StreamYard thing. So if you guys can kind of let me know right now if it sounds any better. So, because as of right now, there's not a lot we can do about it at the present moment.
Oh, you're back. That's good.
So,
all right. Hopefully we're good to go. Hopefully everybody got my amazing breakdown of Zeke Correll, because he's just that good and he's underrated.
Okay. So real quick, am I choppy again now that Vince has come back? I know, Vince, you're still choppy. I just listened to it, so you're still choppy.
Right.
You, man.
It sounds good to us, but like, if you probably go over to YouTube, it probably is not great. Awesome. Just what we need. The biggest show of the year.
So Vince, why don't you go out for a minute? I'm going to kind of
Okay.
set up the next couple things and then try to come back in. We'll do a little sound check here with you out. So just you listen to you pull the show, Vince, and see if how it is for me, and then we'll figure it out. So look, I know y'all are frustrated again. This is a StreamYard problem. This is a streaming problem. This isn't really something that I have. There's not a button that I can fix to make it. So we'll try to get this corrected here real fast. But just give us a second. So I'm going to try to get Vince to reset his, and then I'll reset mine. But yeah, there's yeah, I'm actually listening to myself. So yeah, I don't really know what to do about this one. So Vince, I'm going to step out. Why don't you go ahead and check yours here real quick, and we're going to try to get it fixed, folks, because I wouldn't be able to listen to this for the next hour. So let me go out and check that.
That sounds good. Yeah. Hopefully it sounds a little bit better now that I'm here all by myself. It sounds good to me personally, but I don't know how it's going to sound out there in YouTube land. My guess is it's not getting any better, which is probably not a great thing. So we'll see what happens when Brian comes back, and we'll kind of go from there. But it's very difficult to listen to myself. All right.
So Vince, we'll just real quick have you check out real fast, and we'll see if we can get that fixed. So just give us 1 second. So yeah, it gets frustrating sometimes, because it's one thing if it's something we can fix, but if it's a StreamYard thing, then there's not a lot we can do about it. Okay, so here's what I think we might have to do, folks. This is what we might have to. Here's what we might have to do. Okay, so we might have to call a little bit of an intermission here. And what I'm going to do, Vince, is I'm going to create a new show.
Okay.
And because it just could be this connection, start a new show. So don't go away, people. We're going to start a new show that we're going to start here in about 10 minutes. It's going to be same name. So find it at YouTube. We're just going to take a little 10-minute break here to get that new stream published, hoping that that's it. I hope that fixes it. We'll see if that does it. So we're going to start a new season prediction show. So just give us 10 minutes, because again, I just want to explain to people that there's not a lot we can do. We have a couple super chats that I do want to just show real quick.
Oh, nice.
Bear with us. Okay, Jason Long, there's been issues about competition in the past. Coaching regime, is that drastically different now with Coach Freeman and his new staff? It seems to be. I mean, there's guys we thought would start that aren't starting. There's guys who've been starters in the past who are backups now.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that's the case, Jason, for sure. We've got Chief Brody. I still think Notre Dame needs to take advantage this year. Better QB than all but one team on the schedule. Top 10 roster, no truly elite teams, 4-team playoff. I agree. I completely agree with you.
That, Chief.
Call me Ty. The NFL is having their joint practices this week. How cool would a spring practice week be against some local schools like Purdue? We've talked about that, Vince.
I would love it personally.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I would support that within reason.
Right.
Just some. There'd be some things I would want to make sure that they're doing to protect players and travel and things like that. So we'll see. Some people are saying that it's fixed. Vince,
that's a good thing. Let me pull it up and see how it sounds to me.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. So yeah, if it's going good, then we'll just stick with it, right? So keep letting us know, because I'm going to work through these super chats and hopefully it gets better.
Yeah.
We have another super chat from Truman. I feel the media outside of South Bend, Indiana, is sleeping on Audric Estime harder than Rip Van Winkle. How is Audric not even honorable mention freak list? Good question. I don't know what Audrich's testing numbers were, Truman, but I am shocked at how little attention he gets. I mean, he went out, looked great in a bowl game, and he looked great against Clemson. It's not like Audrich didn't play well in some of the bigger games. So, I don't really know why that's happening.
Right.
Vince.
He'll have an opportunity this year, though. I mean, there's no doubt about that, Truman. I mean, it's, again, Notre Dame has 3 big-time marquee games where, he's the bell cow, and they will go as he goes. And so if Notre Dame's going, then Audrich Esme is going to get a lot of national attention. That's how I see this going.
Yeah. Yeah, Vince, it's actually not better. It's in and out. So I think we're just gonna have to restart it. So listen, folks, I know this is frustrating. It's very frustrating. No more frustrated right now than I am, believe me. But what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna create a new stream as soon as I end this show. We are going to move over to the next show. So we got the super chats in.
Thanks,
I appreciate all of you that got those super chats over to us. We will kind of slide over and get all that done. And so just give us about 10 minutes. Actually, we're going to start in about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to set the show now so you all can jump over to that one then. Again, I can't promise you that one's going to better.
We're hoping.
To be honest with you, but hopefully a reboot will allow us to kind of get this thing rocking and rolling. So I do apologize at this point in time, and I said we'll kind of get this going. So we'll get started here. Let's go 7:45. We will get started at 7:45. How about that, everybody? So I'm getting this set up now, and we'll get rocking and rolling. So we're gonna end this show now, or end this feed,
part of it,
and we're gonna jump into the next one. So hope all of you all come over there with us. Right,
come on
same
back.
Place. Everybody gets a little snack break.
Yeah,
we'll get set and rock and roll, and then we're gonna switch on over there. So. And I know some people saying it's better now, but I just want to take a chance of us constantly doing this throughout it. So this is a little intermission. We'll come back, Vince. And I believe what we have left is we're going to jump into our Notre Dame season predictions, then have our bold predictions, and then go to our other stuff. So don't take off, folks. Just join us on the new feed, and we'll be back over there here very, very shortly.